Great. I'll leave you to it, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. Hang on, we've gone on too far. We've gone on to the slide I don't want yet.
Just use your arrow. There we go. There's arrows there. You can go back.
Okay. Sorry about this, folks, but I am a complete and utter Luddite when it comes to information technology. Anyway, my name's Chris Woodard. I used to be with environmental health at a local authority. My responsibilities were in the day public health pest control and the legislation we used to enforce to go along with that. Dangerous dogs that we used to do for the police. So we did all dog enforcement in Stevenage. Animal licensing. And this is where I got involved with some of the species we're dealing with here today. Okay, so I'm going to... that's where I need to be, sorry. I'm going to deal with this title, Accidental Imports of Dangerously Venomous Arachnids, in reverse. So the sorts of arachnids we're going to deal with today, because there are more arachnids than just spiders and scorpions, are just two groups of arachnids, and they are spiders and scorpions. Dangerously venomous. So all spiders and all scorpions, true scorpions, are venomous. Whether they are venomous to us, human beings, is entirely debatable. In the case of spiders, their venoms are nearly always used as an offensive weapon for catching prey. In the case of scorpions, it can be used both in defense and offense. So that's when people get stung. Accidental imports. Why accidental imports? Because the thing is, lots of spiders and scorpions are brought in for the hobbyist. Many species are obviously non highly venomous, and as a consequence, are proliferated through the pet trade. And there are some people that keep dangerous wild animals, which are under the 1984 amendment to the Dangerous Wild Animals Act. People can keep certain boothid scorpions, another scorpion, which is in a different family altogether. This might sound a bit technical, and about 4 or 5 different taxa of spiders. So when we talk about accidental imports, I'll deal with a case later on in relation to how some came in through non-accident, but this is where they come in. The sorts of places they come in, they can come in on vehicles, through packaging and containers, clothing, military equipment, food and produce, and that like. On vehicles, I had a case many years ago where one of the groups of animals we're going to be talking about today came in, hitched a ride actually on a vehicle that had been imported or exported to the US and came back with this whole group of animals on there. So these are the spiders we're going to be talking about today. Now, I said dangerously venomous. It's debatable if this first one, Cheiracanthium species, the sac spiders, probably isn't dangerously venomous, but it can cause a bite reaction in people. Sometimes it's been implicated with a systemic reaction of people feeling sick and the like, but there's no one ever died of a Cheiracanthium bite. But they do come in from time to time, and they're usually in produce, food produce. Next along, the Latrodectus, the true widows, of which there are about 30 species in the world, over 30 species. And I've had dealings with 3 or 4 of these species of these over the years. And these are probably fall into the category where you're going to more likely get these things come in, and they are highly venomous. We'll talk about them in some depth a little while later. The next one along, the Loxosceles, the Recluse spiders, of which there are about 100 species, but only about a dozen species which are implicated as with envenomation in people. In other words, causing reactions in people. And the last one there, the one at the bottom, Phoneutria, the wandering spiders. There are 8 species in that family, in that genus, I should say, and they are all pretty venomous, some more than others. They're in a family called Ctenidae, and what I said earlier about these arachnids being imported, other members of that family, Ctenidae, have been imported for the pet trade into the UK. Okay, this is the Cheiracanthium species, of which there are quite a few, but 1 or 2 affect people. They nearly always come in from South Africa in produce like grapes and the like. They got extremely long fangs. Why do they call them sac spiders? It's because they don't build a web as such, but they build a sac to protect themselves up to avoid desiccation and protect them from predators like parasitoid wasps and the like. And they are quite small. This is not a big spider by any stretch of the imagination. While I was with Environmental Health, the local authority, we probably had a couple of dozen of these come through in my time there, which was 27 years. So they're pretty common. And the bite on the right there, I don't know if you can see it, is the sort of minor necrosis that you get associated. So necrosis, rotting of tissue. Sometimes you suffer these if you're dealing with wasps, a small necrotic wound, but it's more noticeable with this group of spiders. So that's Cheiracanthium. As I said, they do wander about. They don't build a web, only this sac to protect themselves from the elements. And they do have quite long fangs. There are lots of spiders of different types that come in with fruit and veg. Some are of no consequence whatsoever. Huntsmen, some of the big huntsman spiders, quite often come in with commodities, including furniture, fruit and veg, that sort of thing. And they are big, impressive spiders, and they do get confused with some of the more dangerous species we're going to discuss a little bit later on. But you'll often see species of jumping spiders, Salticides, that come in with those sorts of commodities, and they build an egg sac in amongst the produce. And it has happened in the past where someone has jumped the gun and said it's a Brazilian wandering spider, and the press get hold of it, and of course some of the tabloids thrive on this stuff. It's completely sensationalist what they start printing. So if I were to say to you, out of all of these 4 groups we're going to be talking about today, which are likely to come in to the UK, likely to become colonise the UK, in certain places, indoors perhaps, and cause a venomous bite, which can be life-threatening, but in most cases it isn't, it would be these spiders here. The redback, which you'll be familiar with, Latrodectus hazelti, which is the Australian species, which has now colonised through trade, that sort of thing, colonised the Pacific Rim. It's actually colonised parts of Japan, Indonesia, and even New Zealand, where it has its own species of Latrodectus, and it's actually pushing that species out. The Latrodectus mactans, the one that we see, the next one along, is the eastern black widow of North America. There is a western species called Hesperus. I've encountered both of these species. Hesperus was actually coming in. Some specimens came to me way back in the time of the first Gulf War, when they were inadvertently transported in containers with missiles, Patriot missiles, which were an air defence system. And a whole container, or several containers, in fact, had these on, and literally thousands of babies. So it was almost a colony arrived en masse with this Latrodectus hesperus. Next one is we do have a European black widow, and of course they're not always black. Sometimes you'll see this in Hazelti and in the Mediterranean widow. They have red markings on their back. More often, there is nearly always a red hourglass marking on the underside, but it isn't always that easily seen because that's a female, and the female, when their body's expanded, the red marking, the hourglass, is easily seen. When they've got a shrunken abdomen, it's less easily seen. So don't go by that. So Mediterranean black widow, I actually was in Italy a few years ago and actually caught some of these on the Spanish steps around a lamp where obviously they're attracted to lights because of the insect of prey that come there. They're not attracted to light itself, but the insects that are attracted to light obviously provide a brilliant food source for them, and they can utilize that sort of place. The other species on the end there is the brown widow, Latrodectus geometricus, and that's quite common and often comes in with grapes and the like. I think I found the one I was referring to, Hesperus and Latrodectus, the brown widow, in grapes more often than I have any of the others. We did have some South African black widows come in, which they call button spiders, just to confuse things. This is the colloquial names that get used, and it's better off to use the scientific names. And they came in with grapes. What I would say about Latrodectus, the whole genus of spiders, which has got a worldwide distribution, it's found on all the continents except Antarctica, is that it is anthropogenic. It's often found around human habitation. An example of which was when I was in Western Australia, quite a remote location. This spider, you could find it in the town, the one town that was nearby, and in buildings away from the town. But when you looked for it out in the desert, in amongst shrubs and the like, you couldn't find it. You very rarely found it. The only place I did find one was there was a toilet on a beach on the Ningaloo Reef, a public toilet. Went in there and there was one associated with a toilet. And obviously there is a little rhyme that goes with or song that goes with the redback spider about them hanging around the toilet seat. They do that for a number of reasons, because flies are attracted there and it's easy to catch flies. And that's why they're there. But they have this association with human habitation. And we see this obviously with the false widow that we have in the UK now. It's quite often found around human habitation. In fact, it's very often found around human habitation. But you go looking for it out in the field and they're a job to locate. They're just not there. So this is the sort of the things that one of them here on the end there is eating a baby eastern brown snake. So they have these very strong webs, like a scaffold structure. And if you touch the web, it is really sticky and messy, and they're able to catch prey much larger than themselves. This snake has strayed into the web and has fallen prey to the snake. And it's not uncommon for redbacks in particular to take prey quite large. They'll even eat lizards, and even mice sometimes fall into their webs. Or should I say, stray into their webs. They've got a pretty potent venom, so it's a neurotoxic venom, and it works quite quickly. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a little while. The one in the centre, another one is the redback. And if you look quite closely at this screen, you can see the male of the species just there in the top left-hand corner, coming in to mate with the female. That is an adult male. They're of no threat whatsoever. Like all males, we're no threat. It's only the girls that are trouble. And his sole purpose is to mate with the female. He will sometimes get eaten by the female, providing he doesn't make the right overtures. He'll send the wrong signal to the female and will occasionally get eaten by her. But it's usually when he's coming to the end of his days, and he may have mated with several females during his life. They take a little while to reach sexual maturity, but then when they reach sexual maturity, that's the size difference. They're sexually dimorphic in size, so their size difference is their most notable thing. And at the end there, that's a Latrodectus web. It's actually the egg sac there looks as though it could be Geometricus, the brown widow. The reason I say that, it's got a very spiky appearance to the web, but that may have happened as the young were hatching out. And there can be several hundred, up to 150, 200 baby spiders in there, and they are tiny, minuscule. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them and some other tiny spiders unless you put them under a microscope or a hand lens, or if you know what you're looking at. And that's one of the reasons why the false widow has spread so well in the country, particularly recently. So the venom on the species, I mentioned that it's a neurotoxic venom. So that's neurotoxic venoms are usually quite systemic. In other words, you get bitten at one location, but your whole body suffers a reaction. And in the case of the black widows and the others associated, the Latrodectus, you will get all sorts of conditions. So you'll get stomach cramps, you will have difficulty breathing, heart palpitations, you may suffer trauma in the chest and pains in the chest. And in male people that get bitten, members of our sex, it can cause priapism. Now, priapism is a rather nasty condition. It's an erection of your genitalia which you can't get rid of, and it's extremely painful. And it's pretty unpleasant. I haven't been bitten myself, I hasten to add, and I don't suggest anyone who wants to try it out instead of Viagra stick their hand in a widow nest, because you won't really want what you get afterwards. So that's the venom of that particular species. So it can cause that. Incidentally, in Australia, these things, I use that the redback more than any other spider, because I've seen more of them when I've been in Australia. They can reach very, very high density around buildings, and yet not that many people get bitten by them. And I think we really need to take this into account when we start talking about these spiders. There's a lot of bad press because spiders aren't liked by many people, or it's one of the greatest phobias. I think it's number 1 or 2 in animal phobias. Then you get this almost sensationalist hysteria associated with spiders. You know, I have seen them in these places, and I spoke to a guy that had actually been bitten by several times, been bitten by redbacks. When he first received a bite, when he lived in another part of Australia as a kid, he was quite ill. But subsequently, he's been bitten about 4 or 5 times since, and it's gradually decreased. Now, that could be something to do with the amount of venom that the spider has injected when it bites. They've got very small fangs, incidentally. Or it could be that he's built up some sort of resistance to the venom. Who knows? But yeah, no one has died from a redback bite. The treatment is pretty good. with regard to treating them, and the same goes in the US, and they're pretty well found around human habitation in all sorts of places. I found them in around a hotel complex in Florida. That was a Latrodectus mactans. So that's the thing to keep an eye out for. You can find them, but you're probably not going to see them unless you go looking, and at night usually is the best time. Will they become established here? They already have, and the colony's been wiped out. A colony of Latrodectus hesperus from Western United States became established at a Ministry of Defence site. As I suggested earlier, the ones I dealt with were on some containers, but this was at another cruise missile establishment, and they were well established there. And someone I know was involved in actually destroying them, getting them under control. So in sheltered places, they can become, I would imagine any of these species I've discussed could become well established. Okay, this is a spider that the newspapers absolutely love this group of spiders, and this is the Phoneutria. Two species, and you'll hear the name Brazilian wandering spider. There's two species that of Brazilian wandering spider, and Phoneutria nigraventa, and another one called Phoneutria fera. They are very venomous, and like the Latrodectus genus, unlike the Latrodectus genus, they don't build webs. They're called wandering spiders for a reason. They just wander around in rainforest, in quite a close association to people, and they are in Brazil, in the main cities. Lots of people suffer bites from this species. The one on the left there is one that I had presented to me via the Medical Entomology Centre at Cambridge University when I was giving a talk. And they come out with this spider and said, "What do you think this is?" And it was a Phoneutria species. I think it's Boliviensis. They wanted me to get it from one container to another. So, they stayed out the lab and looked through the portholes, and I moved it into the other container. And then I had it here a little while, and it produced an egg sac. Again, quite a large egg sac. So when people come to you and report an egg sac on bananas, because this is where this spider quite often comes in via bananas, the egg sac is attached to the banana. It won't be a Phoneutria. Phoneutria nearly always carry their egg sacs around with them and defend them. The second spider there is in a defensive pose. Another name for this group of spiders is armed spiders, because they don't hold these arms up. And if provoked, they will go on the attack. Lots of spiders will try and run off. These will actually defend themselves. And there have been cases of them running up brooms and biting people on the hand. How true that story is, I don't know, but I wouldn't be at all surprised. We had a guy bitten in the UK going back about 20, 30 years ago, working in a supermarket, and he was actually bitten by this spider on the face. He was very lucky because at that time there was no antivenin for the species available in the UK. All the antivenin was in South America for people that were getting bitten over there. So he was pretty lucky. Like the Latrodectus, as I was saying, it is a neurotoxic venom, so it is highly systemic and will cause the same situations in people: stomach cramps, palpitations, and if anything, the venom of this species is probably more toxic than Latrodectus. And there are experiments being undertaken, research in relation to its enhancing erections in men. And so they're looking at some way of getting the properties in that venom, isolating different components, and it being used as a drug perhaps in future. The one on the right hand side there is actually Pilotennis, I think, from East Africa, West Africa, and that is imported as a pet, through the pet trade, through people who want to keep spiders. It's not a member of the genus, but it's closely related to them. The Dangerous Wild Animals Act 1976/84 amendment doesn't cover that species, but its venom is probably quite potent. I've had some here, and they are as fast as anything, and quite literally aggressive like the Phoneutria. So not something to be trifled with, and I would be very careful if you want to keep spiders, not to keep these as a beginner. Okay, well, here we go. Loxosceles, the recluse spiders. The brown recluse, which is from Midwest USA, has been implicated with many bites in the US. In fact, there are 6 species, I believe, including Loxosceles, the brown recluse, in the US, but they all have quite limited distributions and are nowhere near as toxic as Reclusa, Loxosceles reclusa, the brown recluse. The bites that you're seeing there, it says it's a bite from a brown recluse, is entirely debatable whether it was. What's been discovered with spider bites is that in people, or highly venomous spider bites, is in that people that are obese or have circulation problems, diabetes, that sort of thing, suffer more of an effect from necrosis from these spiders than would normally be the case in a normal, healthy, fit individual. The other thing that has been implicated is that bacteria living on the spider fangs, the chelicera of the spider, can cause an infection which can result in a thing called necrotizing fasciitis. So this is a streptococcal infection, and it literally eats tissue. It isn't the effect of the bite; it's the effect of the puncture in the body, along with the injection of these bacteria into the site, which normally wouldn't get in there. So that is probably what's happened here, if it was a spider bite. If you really want a really good read, if you can see that, the Brown Recluse by Richard Vetter, Cornell University Press, that's a brilliant read. It dispels a lot of myths in relation to brown recluse, and talks about the media coverage and treatments, control of the spider. Not that I've ever seen one in the UK. I've included this slide here because they almost certainly have arrived in the UK and may have died out. But I've never received a specimen myself. In the places they're found in their range in the US, they are pretty abundant in and around human habitation, usually in human habitation. And most of the bites that occur is when someone is putting on a piece of clothing or shoes or something like that and get bitten. Again, there are a species that don't build a web. They tuck themselves away reclusively, as the name suggests, in darkened places, in clothing, and that's when bites occur. But people who suffer a spider bite outside the range of this spider, which, as I said, is the Midwest and a couple of the southern states, often complain that they've been bitten. Even doctors have said they've been bitten by a brown recluse, where in actual fact, nothing, they're outside the normal range. The spider doesn't occur in the areas where the bite is alleged to have taken place. I remember seeing a case recently where a woman went to her doctor and the doctor looked at this bite. And she said, I've been bitten. He went, oh, yeah, you've been bitten by a spider. She said, no, I haven't. It's a horsefly bite. I saw the thing that bit me. But immediately, even professional clinicians are jumping to conclusions in that it's a spider bite when it isn't. And this is why we've seen this flurry. It's died down a bit now of bites which have allegedly taken place from Steatoda nobilis. Probably nothing of the sort, and sometimes could be just a mosquito bite or a tick bite even, and it causes an infection. The other thing to say here is that no one has ever died of a spider bite in the UK, either from a native species or one of these species I'm discussing here today. No one has ever died, and yet in the last 6 months, 7 months, I think we've had 4 people killed by dangerous dogs. So, take that away to consider. And yet people will harp on about spiders done this, they've done that. They're quite often they're a victim of sensationalist and hysteria. Okay, these are a couple of. Excuse me a moment. A couple of other things that occasionally come in. I've chose these 2 particular genera of scorpions, Centruroides and Titius, not because they're the only scorpions that come in, but they're the ones that are more likely to come in with produce, i.e. bananas, that sort of stuff. I had a lady some years ago when I was with the local authority. She had gone to a well-known supermarket, bought a bunch of grapes, opened them up in her car, peeled one off, and immediately felt a pain in her hand, looked down, and a scorpion dropped out of the bunch of grapes. Almost certainly a Titius species. Some of these species are quite difficult to determine what they are species-wide. We can get it down to a genus, but you'd need to be a real scorpion expert. And we've got one listening here today, I think, Steve Trim from Venom Tech. But you would need to be a real scorpion expert to determine the difference between species of Centruroides and species of Titius. And there are lots of them. These are boothid scorpions. They're in the family Boothidae, and are obviously subject to the Dangerous Wild Animals Act when being kept. But obviously, when they're imported accidentally like this, that's another kettle of fish. Anyway, she suffered the sting, had a great deal of pain, and the scorpion was caught, and it went to a place where they were keeping scorpions. But she did recover. So I suspect scorpions, and I don't have any figures, are less likely to come in that sort of thing than spiders. But certainly, hello, we've got a dog barking somewhere. But certainly they do come in from time to time.
Chris, just to give you a couple of minute warning, we've only got a few minutes left.
Okay, right. Well, I'll round up there. It's just that one case I dealt with was a particular highly venomous scorpion, which had been imported on purpose. Someone had brought them in, not for the pet trade, but they were misidentified. It was a thing called Liurus quinquestriatus, and it's probably the scorpion with the most potent venom. And these turned up in a pet shop in Stevenage way back in 1994, and I was tasked with rounding them up in the whole of the UK. I was a point of advice for these people. So they turned up in several pet shops. 300 in the end were confiscated by the police, local authorities, and the other authorities. And we averted people getting stung by their pet scorpion. Anyway, hope you found that okay and interesting. And I'm ready to take questions.
Fabulous, thanks, Chris. It's one of those subjects, isn't it? I mean, by me, your knowledge is amazing, and you could talk about them all day long. I think everybody here feels the same. It's fascinating. We've got one question in the box. I'm just going to paraphrase it because it's quite a long question, but it's about integrated pest control and the fact that sometimes spiders are used for sort of biological control in eating aphids and grapes and things like that. So they're kind of asking, do you feel there should be done to educate the consumer who may find them?
Yes, most definitely. And this is where there's a big failure. As I said, there's almost an inherent fear, phobia with spiders and snakes to a certain degree. I think spiders in particular, I think it's one of the main phobias, animal phobias. And we need people to be educated in what they're seeing. There have been cases where a whole terrace was evacuated because a Phoneutria egg sac allegedly was found on some bananas, and it was felt it was going to spread through the whole block. This was printed in the newspaper, so I don't know how true it was. And pest control were called in, and they treated the whole block. When in actual fact, the spiders involved were tiny little jumping spiders, and it was just the egg sac. So there is a massive overreaction when people mention spiders.
Yeah, what do you recommend, just as a last little thought for everybody? So, with pest controllers, with public health pest controllers, we don't really deal with spiders. We don't know how to identify them. So what can we do if we come across them, or a customer rings us or takes a photo and sends it to us? Who can we get in touch with?
Well, first and foremost, if this is a customer complaining about house spiders or false widows, for instance, it's your job. I always was taught in pest control that 50 to 75% of your job is education. And even more so when we come to some of these peripheral animals that people want stamped out. In the case of some of these species I've spoken of today, or these taxa I've spoken of today, then you need to be contacting the likes of, Natural History Museum. I mean, I can look at some of them, but I can't go travelling up to Scotland to look at a spider in a warehouse. But I can have a look at over the internet. Believe it or not, I can open emails, and I can look at those. But I do need good pictures. It isn't worth putting a picture on something that's about this big in the size of a screen. So I do need some quite good pictures. And dare I say, although this may be difficult, a size comparison. So I wouldn't want you putting something down size comparison at the side of a wandering spider, which is trying to launch itself and dig its fangs into you. But certainly a size comparison will be good. But I think most people would know what a highly venomous and highly dangerous spider is looking like. But these are, I want to emphasize, these are extremely rare occurrences when they happen.
Yeah, like you said, pest controllers, if it's a house spider or a false widow spider, we're pretty used to being able to ID those, but it's more the obscure ones. And of course, with customers, you want to be able to advise them on where they can go to get that advice.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Great. Exactly. That's good. Fabulous. Well, thank you, Chris. Amazing. And we done well with the technology as well. I think we all have done today. So yeah, that's always a good thing. So thank you. And again, a round of applause, virtual.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Take care.